Happy Pervert Girl Fall! For today's episode, we will be discussing a topic under the umbrella of sexual ethics. Yay for me! Woohoo! More specifically, we will be talking about what is considered sexually perverse.
Okay, so before we dive into the content of this podcast, I'm going to make a little note that it has come to my attention by me while editing these episodes that I have a habit of referring to like world-renowned philosophers as that guy or this one guy.
She says, so this guy, so there's this guy.
Yeah.
So there's these guys. So there's this one guy.
So I want to apologize for that. I will be more conscious of that moving forward, and I will be addressing them as philosophers as they are.
Well, they also are.
They also
guys.
are all guys so far. Hopefully we'll be getting into some women philosophers soon.
Yeah, we haven't talked about any women. And today, no either. That's unfortunate. Anyways, let's get started. There are two common views of sex that are taken in philosophy of sexual ethics that most beliefs fall under. They're outlined by David Benatar in Sexual Perversion and Moral Disapproval. The first one is the significant view, which says that sexual union can be acceptable only if it reflects the reciprocal love and affection for both parties to the union. Sex must signify love to be permissible. It assumes that sex is not just a physical act, but rather sex has moral and symbolic meanings. This is commonly taken by conservatives or like traditional views, though it's not always religious. People can have this view. 100% opposite of that is the casual view. This view contrasts with the significant view because it holds that sex does not need to have a significance to be permissible. So under this view, hookup would be okay. I do want to note that this position argues that sex can be morally neutral or even good, but it doesn't have to be. It can still be casual.
In other words, philosophers have been trying to justify your situationship since the break of dawn.
I don't need a philosopher to justify it. I can gladly justify it myself. Benatar ultimately rejects the absolutism of both extreme and proposes a middle ground, but I still think it's helpful to hold these two views in your mind while we get into this, because for the most part, you can see all these views lean one way or the other. Yeah.
So now that we covered the main views, the sex must mean love camp, and then the sex can just be fun camp, let's move on to what happens when philosophers actually start asking the real questions.
There's
right?
a camp. There's a camp for sex can be fun.
So me and Olivia are going to outline a couple philosophers. First, we're going to explain what their account of normal sexual desire involves, and then what their account of sexual perversion involves. We're also going to talk about a couple of different examples, such as like porn or masturbation for each of these philosophers. We're going to talk about what each philosopher would have to say about these acts. So first, we're going to talk about Nagel. And if you listen to our last episode, you might be a little familiar with him. Nagel covers a lot of different philosophy. His account of normal sexual desire basically involves what he calls a reflexive mutual recognition of the other person as like an individual. So remember that mutual desire is required for normal sexual desire for Nagel. So both parties must be consenting. They must be aware of the sexual desire, and it has to be reciprocated between the two of them. This is super important. That reciprocity brings into a situation where each person is like aware of the other as a desired subject, not just as an object. And this is what he describes as a psychologically complete sexual encounter. So the role of this psychologically complete sexual encounter is to represent fulfillment or like the proper aim of human sexual desire. So it's what human sexual desire should be. It's almost a normative claim that he's making. Sex, he argues, brings a sense of shared experience and like intimacy. Obviously, this involves like emotional and psychological connection, but it also serves as a model for what is ethical and what humanizing sexual experiences should be in an ideal world. So that was Nagel's account of what normal sexual desire is. It's pretty easy to see what a deviation from this might be, but he does describe it explicitly. So Nagel asserts that something is perverse when it disrupts the chain of mutual recognition that I just described. Something might be perverse sexually if it involves desire that's one-sided, or if it's directed at like the wrong kind of object. So remember, for Nagel's normal sexual desire, it needs to be directed at a person who we're seeing as a whole subject, not just an object. So perversion happens when like that feedback loop of I see you seeing me seeing you, when that feedback loop breaks down, that's when perversion comes in. There's also something I want to mention here. There's an important nuance that we need to stress. Nagel doesn't mean perverse in like a moralistic or condemnatory sense. We usually see perverse as something like extremely negative. We usually associate it with like something sinful or morally wrong.
Yeah, sinful or bad or like unacceptable.
Right, like morally, socially unacceptable, something like that. But Nagel
Freaky deaky.
Nagel is using perversion descriptively, so he's not using it as a synonym for like bad. It just means incomplete. Perverse for him means it's not quite capturing what the human experience fully could be.
That's a really important thing to know. In all of these philosophers' points, when we use the term perverse, we are talking about it with the latter definition in mind that Kayla used. We are not saying that sex is morally wrong.
Yeah. I don't want you guys to come away from this podcast thinking that we're extremely sex negative and we don't support or condone certain sex acts. That's not what we're talking about. We're simply explaining how some philosophers descriptively describe perversity.
So, Kayla, I have a question. According to Nagel, would masturbation then be perverse?
So, great question. According to Nagel, yes, masturbation is perverse, but only in a technical sense. So that's kind of calling back to what I just said about him using perversion descriptively. But yes, masturbation does fall under the umbrella of perverse for Nagel. The reasons for this include the fact that there's no other person involved. So like it's self-directed, it's towards you. There's no shared awareness with another person.
What if you're thinking of someone else?
I mean, that's also a great question. I don't think a lot of us just masturbate and think about nothing. There is usually an object of our desire, right? So that kind of complicates things, perhaps. But even if you're thinking of somebody else while masturbating, for Nagel, it might not be self-directed now, but the other person isn't a consenting subject. Either way, whether you're thinking about a person or not, it still represents like an incomplete form of sexual desire that fails to achieve the mutual recognition. There's that fullest expression of human sexuality is not there because there's potential for having this emotional engagement with another person, and instead you're choosing to do it with yourself.
So I want, like, this makes sense to me for artists or like actors, but I wonder what Nagel would say about like if your object of desire is your partner,
is a real person, or like your partner.
Someone you know, not just a real person.
That's a great question. I think it really gets to the heart of Nagel's account of sexual desire. It's a little complicated, but I still do believe that Nagel would say that masturbating to another person, including your partner, is still perverse. And here's why. Even if you're masturbating to your partner, there's no reflexive arousal. You're still kind of aroused by your own fantasy, not by another person's real arousal. So remember, he thinks that this reflexive arousal has to happen in real time. So even if you're imagining your partner, even if you're thinking about something that actually happened, like a past experience, it's still created in your mind. So it's like sort of a fantasy. It's still self-directed.
Okay, that makes sense. And I don't mean to keep beating this dead horse, but now I'm like, so it needs to happen in the moment. So what would he say about like sexting?
Okay, so that's actually like a fantastic follow-up. I think that's exactly the kind of question that Nagel would never see coming. But it deserves to be put to his theory, right? I do think that sexting is probably closer to a complete sexual desire, but it's still not quite there. it does solve the problem of that mutual feedback loop, right? Because there's reflexive arousal. Each person is being turned on by like the other person's desire. That's amplifying the other and vice versa. And you know that the other person is responding in real time. So it seems like it solves that first problem. There's also like an actual other person involved and you know that they're responding to you. However, your recognition is not embodied. So what I mean by this is like you're aware of the other person's words or images, but not their full embodied presence. That's super important for Nagel. He wants sex to be a one-on-one interaction in which you're fully seeing the other person as a whole person, as a subject. And if you're just seeing their text messages, there's not like a direct sensory exchange that I feel is important for Nagel. What do you think?
Well, but what about pictures?
Okay. I mean, I think we're getting closer and closer to a complete account of sexual desire, but I still don't think it's quite there.
I mean, I'm just assuming when Nagel wrote this, he wasn't thinking about all these little segues in mind, like additive things. But I don't know. It definitely makes me think.
I just think that the reflexivity in texting, it's also mediated by the screen. It's mediated by language. You know, when we text people, we're abbreviating. We're talking differently than we would in real life a lot of the times. True. And so I think that it being mediated by those sort of things also flattens it in a way. It's mutual, but it's not as immersive as it would be if it was a in-person experience.
So also another thing this has me thinking about, like exhibitionists. So some people do get pleasure from knowing that other people are watching them have sex. Would this count then as mutual recognition?
Another great question.
I'm just hitting it hard today.
So sure, you know, in some pornography or exhibitionism, there is definitely a kind of reciprocal awareness, or at least the potential for it, right? If somebody were making porn, and let's say they get sexual pleasure from knowing that people are going to watch it, that's kind of a feedback loop, right? Like, I know you're watching me, and that turns me on, and you know I want to be watched, and that turns you on. So is that not the feedback loop that Nagel describes? I mean,
I think it's definitely easier to see on just like an exhibition level of sex than pornography itself.
Sure.
Because I don't know. I mean, I feel, yes, it does seem like a feedback loop, but also pornography is a lot more nuanced than that, and the reason why people do pornography is a lot more nuanced than that. So I guess we would really have to take that on a situation-by-situation basis.
So, like, if I'm getting your point right, you're pointing out the fact that you can't really separate a single reason that somebody might want to do porn from every other reason or every other, like, social influence.
Yeah.
So you're saying,
I'm saying it would be very difficult.
It would be very difficult to say this person is solely doing porn because they want other people to watch it.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
That's fair. That's fair. I know I've kind of driven this point into the ground, but full mutual recognition requires direct and simultaneous feedback, like both people seeing and responding in real time. So porn definitely has a one-directional awareness in this way. The viewer is obviously aware of the actor, right? The actor might imagine the audience when they're making the porn, but they don't know or they can't respond to any individual's actual arousal. So this one, to me, is pretty clear that Nagel would say is perverse.
All right. So now we're going to move on to a different account of sexual desire, which is proposed by Scruton in his article, A Philosophical Investigation. So he identifies fully human sexual desire. This fully human sexual desire seeks expression through interpersonal and vulnerable sex acts, not just physical release. So this also defines what Scruton would say is the role of a normal sex act. He says that sexual desire starts as a basic animal instinct, but in humans it's also an expression of our unique capacities like free choice, emotional connection, moral awareness, trust, and communication. He also emphasizes that fully human sexual desires require a proper object of desire. So sex has to be about someone.
We can see here that this is pretty similar to Nagel's view.
Yeah, and similar to Nagel, they can't just be seen as an object of the desire, but rather the person, I guess you could say the beloved, has to be seen as a whole embodied individual, not as a mere body or fantasy. So their feelings, personality, and individuality need to be acknowledged in a fully complete sexual encounter. Sexual desire, then, is an expression of appreciation and recognition of another person rather than something that is just for physical release. So if I'm attracted to someone not because of their looks, but because of who they are, like their personality, their presence, my desire is intentional and directed at a proper object. So this contrasts with the lusting after a generic body or a fantasy, because that desire isn't truly about a person. So yes, to the 3 men that are watching this does include Sydney Sweeney. It's perverse, man. You gotta stop. Now let's get to the question that's on everybody's mind. According to Scruton, is masturbation perverse? Please, I have to know. Someone tell me it's okay. Sorry, not this guy. He would say that yes, masturbation is perverse because there's no object of desire. It misrepresents what human sexual desire is supposed to be. Remember, for sex not to be perverse on his account, it needs to be an expression of our unique capacities, so it can't just be used for physical release. So masturbation focuses on physical gratification rather than seeking an interpersonal connection and as an expression of fully human sexual desire. So it's essentially a source of instrumentalizing sex. Now, let's see if Scruton would say that pornography is perverse. So since pornography often relies on myths and lacks a genuine object of desire, it would be perverse, basically. He sees it as a corruption of the self. But you're also reducing actors to certain roles, symbols, or props, so essentially it's misrepresenting and distorting human sexual desires.
Right.
Scruton would say that pornography is a defective expression of sexual desire because it reduces sex to mere instrumentality and fails to fulfill its interpersonal, humanizing purpose.
I think that part about porn portraying their actors as like certain roles is super important too. He thinks that like pornography corrupts the self not because it's like naughty or like bad morally, but it's because
naughty is crazy.
It's because it trains you to see like bodies without seeing people.
I think that's a great point. I mean, obviously, oftentimes when people are going to look at porn, they have a video or at least a subject in mind.
A category.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
A category.
Yeah. So Scruton's big idea was that real, fully human sexual desire isn't just about pleasure. It's about connection, right? It's about seeing and wanting another person as a whole being, not just a body. Now, Immanuel Kant, he takes this idea even further, so it's really it is natural to bring him up here.
Yeah, just to preface this, he's got some pretty extreme takes that we find very entertaining, but you might want to hold on to your...
Clutch your pearls.
Yeah.
Kant never really writes about sex in detail, but his moral philosophy helps like explain why treating someone like an object of pleasure feels wrong. So, a little bit of background on Kant. He believes that humans are inherently rational beings. And this is in contrast to animals and objects because humans can think and like make their own choices, set their own goals, etc. So this capacity to act according to reason is what he calls humanity. And this humanity leads us into believing that humans have intrinsic worth. Because humans can make these moral decisions and also pursue their own ends, they have this sort of special value that's different from animals and objects. I also want to note here that this inherent special value is different from like relative worth, so it's different than how useful or talented something is. It's just something that like every single human has just from being human and being rational. So Kant has this famous rule, quote, "Act in such a way that you always treat humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of any other, never simply as a means, but always as an end," end quote. To translate this, he's just saying don't use people to get what you want. Don't use people just to get what you want. respect their capacity to make their own choices and pursue their own goals. So this was all background on Kant's ethics. In his lectures on ethics from the 1760s and through the 80s, he does acknowledge that we have sexual desires. He actually describes it as an appetite. He asserts that when one person treats another person as an object of sexual appetite, that person's rational nature is subordinated. So their dignity, that special inherent worth that they have, is subordinated by the other person using them as an object. Kant has this hilarious quote where he describes using someone in this way as a, quote, lemon which has been sucked dry, end quote. And you know what they say? When life gives you lemons.
Why not pick something more decadent, Kant? Like, a lemon is just the most tart and...
Right, pick something that
who's
tastes
willingly
good.
sucking a lemon dry?
I mean, I think that this analogy just goes to show that Kant is a virgin. Like, just go to the Rocky Horror Show, have him put a V on your cheek and lipstick, get out there,
Yeah,
please.
that's how obvious it is, Kant.
That's how obvious it is. So then in Metaphysics of Morals from 1797, he sort of describes normal sexual desire. And this is where it gets a little off the rails for both of us. And
it hasn't been off the rails for both of us. Like,
that's true. Kant thinks that normal sexual desire is only okay in the context of monogamous marriage. So sex is only okay if you're married to the person because it would protect you. It would protect both partners from this objectification that he describes.
Mm-hmm. Again, I think it's really important to ask if we should really be taking note from a lifelong virgin who had no riz and no huzz. But I still want to know. Even though I feel like I know what he's going to say, I'm going to ask the question. Is masturbation permissible according to him?
Oh, you're in for a wild ride. So, absolutely not. He puts his foot down on this one. He says it is absolutely not permissible. It is perverse. It does not count as normal sexual desire. He explicitly addresses masturbation, actually, in his Metaphysics of Morals, the same one I previously mentioned from 1797. And he categorizes masturbation as a serious moral violation.
So for Kant, like, perverse, he would say, like, it means morally wrong.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Not just that it's not, quote unquote, normal.
Yeah, like, Nagel and Scruton think that masturbation is perverse in the sense that it's, like, incomplete, but, like, Kant genuinely seems to think it's evil to masturbate. Like, our professor told us on the first day of our Kant class that Kant thinks that masturbation is worse than suicide.
Yeah, let me just give you guys a little bit of imagery for this class. Last semester, we decided to torture ourselves by taking a 400-level moral philosophy class, all on Kant. Mm-hmm. Kant, like, will be a reason for gray hairs.
Remember that we have this rational nature, so that gives a little bit of context to why he thinks masturbation is so bad. He claims that such an act is a violation of one's duty to oneself because it's reducing yourself to your animal instinct. It's neglecting your rational and moral nature and reducing yourself to that physical pleasure. It's essentially using your own body purely for sexual gratification. So this...
Is that such a crime?
It provides a little bit of explanation to why he thinks it's so bad. He thinks that if you masturbate or if you kill yourself, you're committing a similar kind of wrong to yourself and to your own duty towards yourself. But obviously this is very extreme and very outdated also at this point.
Also, we have to keep in mind that these opinions all come from a virgin. I don't mean to be virgin shaming so much, but, like, it's not virgin shaming, it's just...
It's Kant shaming.
Yeah, it's Kant shaming.
Of course, this brings up the question, would porn be okay for Kant? Now, he wasn't writing in a time where porn was a thing, obviously. So this is speculation, but it's pretty clear what he would think. And I think we can confidently speculate here that he definitely would not be okay with pornography. Firstly, he doesn't even support sex outside of marriage, so there's that. Kant's categorical imperative demands that we treat humanity as an end, right? Watching pornography involves consuming the sexualized actions of others for your own pleasure. So you're not regarding the person in the pornography video, you're not regarding their rational agency at all. So it seems to violate the principle, the categorical imperative. So across these thinkers, Nagel, Scruton, and Kant, there is a common thread, and that is that sexual desire isn't just about the body, it's about how we relate to other people, right? Each of the thinkers in different ways worries about what happens when sex becomes detached from like mutual recognition of respect, but they are all pretty different.
Perverts and philosophers alike, we've made it through today's deep dive into sexual perversion. Of course, there are also arguments against porn that we didn't have time to cover, mainly feminist critiques, but it's still really interesting to look at all of these accounts of perversion and how pornography falls into them. I mean, we didn't even really get into the arguments for whether pornography is harmful or not, but at least we have a sense of whether many philosophers would consider it perverse. As we have seen in this episode, sexual perversion in philosophical terms isn't just about morality or taboos. It's about whether your sexual desire is complete, reciprocal, and respectful of humanity, both for your own and for that of others. So some acts are incomplete, some genuinely violate moral duty, but all of them challenge us to think about what it really means to desire another human being.